Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you the top 10 most creative Ark Tames, so let's just get straight into it, shall we? In at number 10 we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and I really do like this creature, and I find, especially when it comes to its elemental abilities, it is on that creative side. While the normal wyverns are still very good in my opinion, and I still very much like them as creatures, I really enjoy what the wyverns bring to the scene. These creatures are fast and agile, and especially when coming to the Crystal Wyverns, their elemental abilities are not something to be reckoned with. They really do have a lot going for them in that aspect. They're just so much cooler in a way than, oh, this creature simply just breathes fire or ice or poison, which is still cool, but having the ability to suck the life out of enemies and, you know, maybe shooting water, you might say, isn't the coolest thing. But still, that Blood Crystal Wyvern is the favourite of mine. I love the ability that it gives off. And from model design as well, these things are all looking way nicer. And the tame method, in my opinion, is a little bit more interesting. While yes, it's fun and enjoyable to go down into the depths of the Wyvern trenches and find whatever you can salvage from there, you're really not going to get the same enjoyment. At least I don't get the same enjoyment from doing the passive tame with this creature, as I find that to be much more enjoyable from my perspective. In at number 9 we have got the Mantis, and come on, this creature does deserve to be here. With its huge variety of abilities, it deserves to make the list in my opinion. And although maybe it's not the most popular one, which is why I've moved it back a bit, because I do take your accounts and thoughts a little bit into consideration in these lists, because after all, you are the community that this channel sort of built upon, and I do like to kind of, you know, call out, shout out and whatever, and sort of take your opinions into consideration when making my list as well, as I kind of want to make these be lists that you like as well as I agree with too. I'm not going to go with something that I completely don't agree with, but, you know, maybe a little bit of a mix and match, a little bit of compromising. But the Mantis for me is definitely one of mine from my mind. I love going around and just shredding through many Ovis on Ragnarok and getting tons of muscle on this thing. They're great for metal gathering as well. You can get picks on this thing. The only thing you really do have to be careful about in some sense is durability does drain it much faster on a Mantis than really just you using it by hand, but it's so much more fun and so much more enjoyable. You might as well give it a go, and they're not the hardest tames in the world. They can take a little bit of elbow grease, but it shouldn't be too bad. Coming up next, we have got the Andrewsarchus, and I really just find, as a concept, this creature is quite an enjoyable one. From just its very creative model design, really adding a lot to it, literally having a gun on the top of its saddle. Also, I find the way that it moves is pretty creative and enjoyable as well. I like this creature in a lot of ways more than something like the Thyla or the Sabertooth, because it just seems to bring a lot more to the table. Again, that mobility on this creature is purely insane, and I can't get round the pure insanity of just how much I love a creature like this. It really does go hand in hand with my playing style, and the gun on the top is just a nice neat extra that I just really enjoy. In at number 7 we have got the Runignatha. Come on, these are sort of the kings of the island as a map, and they're sort of unbeaten in that aspect. These creatures really do a lot in terms of traveling, at least for me, and especially considering you can pick up things like vaults and just get immense amounts of resources across the map with absolute ease. And obviously you can carry Rexes and Parasauritherians around the map like there is no tomorrow. It's obvious why these things are going to be useful, and although while their weight isn't the best off of the bat, but considering again you can pick up those safes, you're going to have no issue, as that does not add weight to the creature. At least as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't. That's kind of a cheat really, so you don't really need an insanely high weight stat, but you do need a vault, which can take a little bit, but trust me, it's not too bad. And at the stage you're going to be taming one of these things, I think that's sort of just going to be the norm. Like, come on, a creature like this is going to be unlocked in the very late game, at least in terms of the saddle level, and taming one is probably going to be even after that. The tame method isn't too dissimilar to the Reaper, which isn't actually on the rest of this list, but I'll give it a brief honourable mention here, as I do think the Reaper is a very nice one on Aberration, and it does add a lot to the map, but not maybe the most creative, because it essentially is sort of a copy of the Xenomorph from Aliens, which is why I had a little bit of deterrence in putting it on the list. But the Rhinognatha definitely does need to be here. It's essentially a completely new creation from Wildcards, and I really do like what they've done with the creature. It's cool, it looks amazing, and functionally it truly is a fantastic one, which you should not underestimate. Continuing on, we have got the gas bags. This is sort of a creature like no other, at least in my opinion. These things are peak when it comes to Ark, at least in my opinion. They're so cute in terms of their model design, and they really hit hard when it comes to travel. They can do quite a decent amount, which maybe you wouldn't expect from a creature like this. But the fact is, they just use oxygen as opposed to stamina, just, you know, to fly around the place. This also does add defense to the creature as well, so that could come in potential use. And while they're not fighters, and sometimes maybe not the most mobile, no saddle is actually required to ride a creature like this, and I find it really isn't that bad in terms of mobility, and you can still get around, and their incredible weight is extremely useful in something like this, for, you know, generally getting around and carrying lots of resources for you. You're not going to need a safe like you will on the Rhinognatha, but this is a creature which you'll be taming and unlocking in terms of saddle way earlier than the Rhinognatha. It's lower grade in terms of creature, but I actually sort of prefer it as a tame, but that's just my general preferences coming out there. I really do like the gas bags. I think it's cute, it's cool, and it's sort of something that's never been done before, and nothing has ever been done like it afterwards, and it still stands to this day as a very creative Ark creature. Coming in at number 5, we have got the Astradelphis, and this really is one of those creatures where there's sort of nothing that really compares to it apart from the Troponatus. Again, that sort of gets another honourable mention here, as they do kind of tie hand in hand as creatures, but essentially they are really just fast beasts. And the Astradelphis does just literally mean space whale, but no, sorry, space dolphin. Astrocetus is space whale. This is the dolphin and not the whale. But I really like the design that has gone on with this creature. And the Troponatus isn't as creative as it was actually just a creature that came out in Ark, but the abilities that it has around it are inherently creative. But this creature still takes a list for me, as it is a completely new idea from Wildcard. Following on from the Astrocetus, of course, it takes a lot of inspiration from it, but it's that kind of lighter variant in a way. It travels with a lot more speed and grace than the Astrocetus, and also, you know, just purely in terms of design and looks, again, I love it. And the Astrocetus is really cool as well. That's quite an interesting creative tame, but sadly that creature is not making the list. Continuing on, we have got the Shadowmane, and come on, a creature like this really does deserve to be on the list, at least in my opinion. It's a creature which is just so jam-packed full of abilities, it deserves to be here in my opinion. Obviously, originally coming out on Gen 2, it really did shock many players when it came out, and it was something so creative. It also was like the highlight of the Gen 2 trailer, so it's got to be on this list for its creativeness. I love it as a creature. Its mobility is something which you really don't see on a lot of creatures. The fact that it also can charge up its damage and attack with just a big massive slash, on top of having the hydration buff and the bleed ability, that works even more effectively on a creature like this, especially considering its size and the fact that it doesn't need a saddle. It's just simply, once you turn to one, go ahead and just go out there and battle, really, because they are very decent at it. The great swimmers too, but considering their codename Lionfish Lion, makes sense. The only disappointing thing about these creatures is, you know, they've been nerfed since release, but still great, and their tame method is just so annoying. In number 3, we have got the Velonosaur, and this is just one of those creatures where I think it needs to be on the list for me. Nothing has been like the Velonosaur, just in any sense. Before it and after it, nothing really can compete with it in that sense. There is nothing like it. I just love this creature and the ability that it offers, where it just shoots its spines from its body into enemies, and it can shake them off to them as well. It's something which you don't see on Ark creatures, and you haven't seen on Ark creatures since, you know, this thing actually released. Obviously the Arvelonsaur is a good upgrade to it, spawning on Gen 2, and I love that creature too, but it is the same one at the end of the day, and that shows its creativeness. Nothing is like it, and it works really well and effectively. Maybe not at the range that I'm showing you here, but still I think it stands, and at longer ranges or mid ranges, which is probably where you're going to be using this thing the most, it really does work effectively to ping off those enemies. It's sort of like your own personal turret, and while you could use turrets, it just seems like a more enjoyable way to use it like this, to have a creature like this to use as a turret. I wouldn't use it in a PvP scenario like a turret, but still, for going around by yourself, you can ping off enemies from afar before they even get to you. At number 2, we have got the Maywing, and this creature is one where I just love it. Okay, it's so good at traveling, and its model design is fantastic. It works really well as a creative creature. Would you expect a giant gliding flying platypus from Genesis Part 2? Not really, no, but that's what you're going to get. And at level 18 you unlock the saddle for this thing. It's an absolute cheat code when it comes to travel. Actually, it's really innovated the gliding space. It's just so good at doing its job, at least in my opinion. While the Rock Drake is another great addition to this, I find the Maywing does this job far better than any Rock Drake ever could, and you know, of course, for that reason, that's why I'm putting the Maywing on the list and not any kind of Rock Drake. You should have no issue flying around with something like this, maybe unless you're going up a steep vertical wall. But even if you're in the ocean, you're still going to be fine with a creature like this, as they're pretty decent swimmers, and they can also skate along the top of the water too, which you might not find on some other Ark creatures. They're great for a portable feeding trough as well, which you can probably tell from that slightly disturbing animation which is on screen, and they also gather berries too. What's not to like? And in number 1, we have got the Bloodstalker. In my opinion, this is the most creative thing that Wildcard has ever done. It is a huge favourite of mine, and I love how this was a creature essentially just designed to work on one whole map and be the one sole creature to work on that map. It is a beast at traversing Gen 1, and since it's the only real effective travel mount on the map, it really has been designed for any kind of lava biome, water biome, bog biome, or ice biome. Just basically everything, okay? The Bloodstalker can do everything, and while it can't walk in lava like a Magmasaur, it certainly is a great swimmer, and it's my favourite underwater tame actually. If you ever checked out my underwater tames video, I'll leave a card up there actually, if you want to go watch that, if I remember to leave a card up there. That is honestly it's a great creature for it, okay? And I also quite like the video as well. I like what I did on the list there, because I agree with it quite a lot. Obviously it is me at the end of the day, but even when you get out of the water, you've still essentially got a Spider-Man as a creature, and you can just go around the place with absolute ease, and you should have no issue with traversing the landscapes. You should just have no issue traversing with a creature of this skill, in my opinion. And also, if you're running low on health, you can always just nick a bit off another creature, you know, you might as well. They really do stand, in my opinion, for all of that. They are great little critters for travelling around the place, and I find they're so creative in design. The most unusual Ark creatures. In at number 10 is the Astrocetus, and this is one of those creatures which on the surface may not seem that unusual, but I really can't think of any other game which has a creature like the Astrocetus. And also, this was a very new thing to Ark as well. No space things had been done in Ark, and the fact that with Gen 1 we had a space biome, and then we had this hunking beast of a creature, it is definitely an unusual Ark tame, as in it isn't like most of the other creatures in Ark. And there are only a couple of creatures which I can think of which are as unusual as this thing, and also at the same time follow the similar genre that this thing has of being a sea creature of sorts. The Astrodelphis obviously being a great example there, that meaning space dolphin instead of space whale, which is what Astrocetus means. Speaking of the Astrodelphis, next up is the Astrodelphis, and the only reason why I would say this is a little bit more unusual than the Astrocetus is its design is more unusual, and also its abilities are a lot more unusual than the Astrocetus. The Astrodelphis is essentially like a dart plane. This thing can just soar through the air and do so many acrobatics and shoot loads of lasers. And yes, it has technically been done before, but you wouldn't really expect it out of this creature, and its design and overall feel is very unusual, and I can't think of any Ark creature other than the Astrodelphis, of course, which controls like the Astrodelphis. And also, again, with the Astrocetus and Astrodelphis, it doesn't really make sense that they work outside of space, but they kind of have to. You know, it is the game of Ark, and there are many other maps, and there are many other biomes that aren't space biomes. So yeah, it just kind of breaks the immersion for me there. But you know, it's Ark, they're fantasy creatures. Who knows, maybe they can just dart around in non-space as well. Although they do make a lot more sense in space biomes. But obviously, for most of the time which you'll be using these things, you won't be using them in space biomes. You'll be using them to travel across the map, as both of them are great traveling mounts. The Astrodelphis being better for traveling, obviously, as it is a significantly faster creature, and also it's just a lot more fun to ride around on. Next up, we have the Bulldog, and this is strangely one of the cutest yet horrifying creatures that Ark has to offer, and obviously it debuted with Operation, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't appeared in any other map since, but be sure to correct me if I did get that wrong. And in terms of this thing's abilities, it is just a light pet like the Shinehorn and the Featherlight, which essentially will debuff things like Reapers and the Nameless. Not really useful on any other map, but they're definitely really cute, and the fact that there is a mask for the Bulldog, and you kind of put the Noglin in the same spot here as they are similar creatures, they definitely are respected but very unusual tames. Now, I don't know what it is, but the Managama always seems really weird to me, and the Managama just seems like a creature which doesn't seem like any other Ark creature which I can think of in any way, shape or form. This is essentially like a Ferox type thing with ice fists that can jump into the air and has some sort of elemental power, and that also has ice breath and can freeze creatures. This is definitely an oddity and an unusual tame which hasn't been revisited since. There is no other Ark creature to this day which is like the Managama, and also the spelling for it is pretty unusual as well, but once you learn how to spell it once, you kind of don't forget it, as its name is that unusual. And it definitely is an extremely useful creature. Obviously, as you can see, it can travel across the map with insane speeds, and it deals a pretty reasonable amount of damage as well, which you can't get out of every great traveling mount. But the Managama definitely is great for that, and like I said as well, it is great at freezing creatures, and in a moment you will see what it is like when it does freeze creatures. The only thing you really have to watch out for though is this thing is extremely buggy and will get stuck on things, and it just did get stuck on something there. In terms of it freezing, it will freeze creatures for a very, very long amount of time, which is why it is heavily used by PvP griefers. I've heard not as much anymore since they got nerfed, but they still get used a little bit in terms of PvP griefing still to this day. Now, the Rock Drake is pretty similar to the Managama in a lot of things, but I think it is slightly more unusual, partly because it did come first. Obviously, Operation was the map that came up before Extinction, and also just the way that this creature is formed is a little bit more unusual. This is kind of like a somewhat T-Rexy chicken. I don't really know where those two creatures came from, but I would just call it kind of a T-Rexy, chickeny, turkey thing. I don't really know where I'm going with that. It is so unusual in the form that it is. You can't really relate it to other creatures, which is very, very weird, and definitely a sign which it is very unusual. But its taming method isn't particularly one of the most unusual, like you would expect from this creature. It is the exact same as the Wyvern. You simply steal the egg from the Rock Drake nest, and then boom, once you've obviously incubated and raised up that creature, you have yourself a Rock Drake. And also they do come in a lot of colours as well, this pink being an example, which is actually quite weird for a lot of Ark creatures, as most creatures do follow a similar colour pattern, whereas the Rock Drake has a wealth of colours, and I actually kind of really like the tealy blue more than the colour which I've got here. I like a tealy blue, like a bluey green is what I kind of like on a Wyvern, not a Wyvern, this is a Rock Drake. Why am I talking about Wyverns? In terms of Rock Drake colour, that is my preference. What is your Rock Drake colour? Comment in the comments down below. Don't know why I said comment too many times in a sentence, but comment in the comments down below. what is your favourite rock drake colour? As I'd really like to know. Mine is definitely that kind of like bluey, greeny thing. But you know, some of you may be digging this pink and purple, which we got here. No, it's not pink and purple. Pink and blue. I may be slightly colourblind. In at number 5 is the gas bags, and this is just a creature which is such an oddity. And also, I'm seriously questioning Wildcard here. How did they come up with the idea for this? Or did we come up with the idea for this? Honestly, I don't know, but somehow this thing was created, and it's been in the game since extinction, and I don't really get how it came around or how the idea came for it. It's literally a farting gas animal which flies on its own gas. It's a very, very weird premise, but actually a very cool creature which doesn't require a saddle. The saddle's only there if you have friends, unlike me, because I don't really have friends I play Ark with, or friends in general, you know, living that life. But that saddle is there if you do have friends, unlike any YouTuber which you can really think of. Us YouTubers, yeah, but we don't really get the friends. This is why we do YouTube, you know. But if you do have friends, then your friend can go on the saddle, and then you can travel together, which is nice, you know. The Diplodocus has a significantly higher passenger count, but that's not on the list because that isn't a very interesting or unusual creature. Anyway, I should stop talking about the Diplodocus. What's actually good about the gas bags? Well, on extinction, this is actually one of the best creatures out there for gathering metal. Obviously, still the RG, and the gas bags is significantly harder to control than the RG, but it is a lot cuter. And it's just, I like using the creatures which came on that map. And I'll always try to use the gas bags, as long as I can control it at the time, to do some metal runs. And once you learn it, it is a really, really great creature for doing those metal runs. If you don't just get stuck in a trench with loads of wyverns and get killed a couple of times. That happened because I forgot to enable creative mode stupidly for this B-roll. But, you know, editing, it looks like I did nothing wrong and I escaped perfectly. But there was multiple attempts in this, and then I flew too high, and I got up caught into the world border. I am definitely not a great pilot of the gas bags. Also, if you find yourself like this, make sure to dismount just before you hit the ground. It'll save you. Now, the Rhinoganatha, I think, came from us. It was from some kind of creature voting thing anyway, and we did vote for this creature to be in the game, and it is one of the more unusual ones. There isn't any other Ark creature which is really like this thing. And also, I know loads of people are saying Rhinoganathas are rare, and I get that they're rare. On ASA at the moment, I've seen about 5 Rhinoganathas in the swamp biome. Is there an overspawn of Rhinoganathas on ASA? Wildcard, can you tell me please, if you're watching this video, because I've had way too many encounters with this thing. I've seen 1 Giga, and I've seen 5 Rhinoganathas, and these things are generally a lot rarer than a Giga, as they only spawn in one specific biome, whereas Gigas can spawn on several places around the map. In terms of the Rhinoganatha's uses though, this thing is essentially just an upgraded Quetz, which is a lot faster and deals more damage. As unlike a Quetz, it will deal more damage. It is significantly harder to tame and uses the taming method, which the Reaper has, which I'll talk about because the Reaper is ahead on this list. Oh my god, spoilers. But either way, the Reaper is ahead on this list, so I'll talk about his taming method similarly there. But you can always check out my Rhinoganatha taming guide if you want to know fully in detail how to tame this thing, and you'll see brief b-roll of me actually taming it, because this is from the guide video. I was just a little bit lazy at the time, and I was just like, I'll take my guide video and then I'll just chuck that into b-roll, which is obviously why you're seeing me tame it here and you're not seeing me tame every other Ark creature in all of the other b-rolls. But it is a very long and arduous taming process, which is extremely difficult and requires 2 Rhinoganathas, not 1. You're going to need 2 of those things, and you're going to need pheromone, you're going to need to kill 1, and then yeah, there's so much. Just check out the tutorial. I really shouldn't talk about it more. The Rhinoganatha is just one of those creatures which is really unusual, and we voted for, and for some reason spawns way too much on ASA. Have no idea why, but it does. This is the Rhinoganatha. It's one of Ark's most unusual tames. The spoiler is here, with the Reaper being in at number 3, and the Reaper is a even more unusual tame than the Rhinoganatha, as obviously it came way before. The Rhinoganatha is the most recent creature which has been added to Ark, apart from the Phasalosuchus. Don't know if that is in ASA at the moment, but I'm going to count that as the most recent Ark creature. Is that thing coming to Scorched Earth or the island? Either way, it might not be here yet, so don't take my word on that one. Not quite sure. That may be a Scorched Earth creature. Actually, thinking about it, that is a Scorched Earth creature. The Oraniganatha was the one for the island. Yes, the Oraniganatha is the latest creature of Ark at the moment. And the Reaper has obviously been in Ark for ages. It came out in Arboration. That was way back in 2017. And this thing was such an oddity at the time, but it really fits into that map, and its taming method is one of the most unusual in the game. Essentially what you do is you'll get a Reaper Queen to a really low amount of health. You can use a trap for this, it will make it so much easier, and you can use light pets as well. Not for the other bit of the taming method though, as that won't work with a light pet. You can't have a light pet when this thing impregnates you when you go up to it after you put its health down. At least I'm pretty sure you can't. Don't anyway, as it may somewhat fail, as the Reapers really do not like light pets. But after you have been impregnated by the Reaper, obviously after you've damaged it and the impregnation has occurred, you just get a ton of XP, and then boom, you have yourself a Reaper. In at number 2 is the Bloodstalker, and this is just essentially a spider with, I don't think 8 eyes, but it may have 8 eyes, or it may have 12. Honestly, comment down below how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as right now I don't know. I'm sure I could look up an image, but I know one of you out there knows the answer to this. But obviously you can tell why the Bloodstalker is so unusual. No other Ark creature is really like this, and you could say the Aranio is another kind of spidery thing, but that is just kind of like a normal spider. The Bloodstalker is like a vampire, blood-sucking Spider-Man thing with an obscene amount of eyes. It may be 8, it may be 12, I'm not quite sure. Make sure to let me know. I want to know how many eyes the Bloodstalker has, as I'm really not sure, as I have not seen one up close and personal for a while. But also, this thing's taming method is very much an oddity. Like no other Ark creature, apart from the Desmodus, obviously off the top of my head, which I can think of, has the same taming method. You essentially get blood bags, which you will need to syringe out of your body, or you can obviously use the Desmodus to harvest them now, but originally you just had to use the blood syringe to get those, and then it will just eat those, and then you'll tame yourself a Bloodstalker, and you can feed it some creatures before to get 100% effectiveness. But honestly, I've never bothered with that, as I'm not going to do like insane things with this creature. Like, I'm not going to fight bosses with the Bloodstalker. I just want a good one. And obviously for missions, you're not even going to need a Bloodstalker, but it is good to get one, obviously, so you can get to those missions, so you can get all of those hexagons. But before you get a Bloodstalker, you should definitely go to the Bogrish missions to practice. And finally, in at number 1 is the Velonosaur. And the reason why I have put this thing in at number 1 isn't because it has the weirdest taming method or anything along those lines. It is just, there has never been any kind of creature like the Velonosaur apart from the Velonosaur. I can think of no other Ark creature like this tame. And albeit, yes, it does have one of the simplest taming methods out of all of the creatures on the list. It is just a very simple knockout tame. No other Ark creature compares to this thing in terms of what it is. This thing, again, is just a moving turret, and there's no other creature which does this like the Velonosaur. And sadly, the damage of the turrets doesn't scale with melee, but obviously you can keep leveling up that stamina to shoot even more turrets out. And obviously I wouldn't recommend it in this close of a proximity, but it is definitely an extremely useful thing, which when you ride this thing you will use a lot. But it also just have your general just attack, hack and slash, and it also can shake spines off of it as well. And also, I think when you look at it head on when it's shooting turrets, it's a little bit creepy. That animation, just to me, is a little bit on the creepy side. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Maciejewski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.